Go on.
Oh, was that going before?
I think so. I hit record.
Oh, so we didn't get
It's
It's going now.
I paused it when that person came to the door,
you did.
And then I started it back up.
Oh, okay, good. Just wasn't sure.
And will it house that first file somewhere?
Yeah, they should all be recorded.
Okay, great.
So.
I'm sorry, continue. So things have been linear for a long time. You were growing the congregation, and does that, did it feel like that could also be said of your married life, your life with your family?
That it's like been linear, or
I'm wondering how broad this feeling is.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, if by linear we mean the sense in that there was never really a process of doubt or extensive deliberation about getting married and having kids and so on. Excuse me. I mean, I really didn't date too much when I was in high school or in college. I mean, a little bit here and there, but.
When I hear the word linear, sometimes it brings to mind for me the idea of choice and conflict within relationships. So I might say that a relationship is linear if, the couple is kind of a single mind or doesn't recognize difference between them and sort of negotiate that to either take slightly different paths or compromise to accommodate one partner's, where one partner is at.
Mm-hmm.
How have you and Karen just dealt with conflict or difference between you in the past?
We've always been pretty good about that. I mean, one thing was when she wanted to go to law school, and as we were starting to have a family, that was something that for me was a little hard to deal with.
What was difficult about it?
Well, I was raised in a family, a culture where they kind of had more traditional gender roles within the family. The man is the breadwinner, the woman is, takes care of things, the children and home, and that was kind of what I always envisioned. But and that's kind of the pattern of my other brothers, aside from my younger brother, one we've been talking about. They more just go to work and
their wives
just stay home with the children. Yeah, so we've been a little different in that regard, in having her, having a career of her own, and it's been great for her.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that attracted me to her in the first place. I mean, a lot of the girls that I went to school with, they were more kind of the cookie cutter, were more on what I would call a kind of linear, track, kind of, husband hunting. And not that Karen, wasn't that, but that she was more.
Yeah. She had some independent interests and a will that she wanted to follow, even while being married and having children and being a mother.
Yeah, yeah, and she had this ambition, and I think that that's something that we both shared.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I went a kind of traditional route of being a preacher, I still had, a lot of ideas for how to do that more effectively, how to do it more differently, how to grow a big congregation and really reach people in creative ways. So that was something I think we recognized in each other.
Yeah, and you believe you told me last week that it's always felt that she's been very supportive of you in the work that you were doing.
Yeah. And was going to say? Oh, that despite all that, admiring that and being attracted to that aspect of her, part of me still liked that idea of being the man, being the breadwinner, and having her take care of the children and so on, the traditional setup.
Mm-hmm.
So when she wanted to start going back to school, I was hesitant about that. I was a little resistant to that, but it wasn't that fraught of a. We didn't have lots of big fights or anything like that. It was just something that it took a while for us to come to consensus about.
So you were talking about it?
Yeah.
Pretty openly?
Mm-hmm.
What did those conversations sound like, or how did they unfold?
She was hesitant herself to ask me about it because she was raised in a similar kind of traditional family structure, and no one, and certainly none of the women in her family, had gone on to a kind of professional career, like she wanted to. So that was challenging for her, but I saw that it was really important for her. And another consideration that we talked about was pragmatic. For our parents and a lot of our extended family, it was a lot easier 30, 40, 50 years ago to get out of high school and get a factory job downtown and raise a family. And at that point, it wasn't yet clear that my congregation was going to grow and succeed and get all these deep-pocketed donors.
So there was an element of potential necessity in what she was doing too.
Yeah. We saw it as a long-term investment of sorts. For the family. And one of the reasons we were able to do it was because we had such support from our parents and our family and neighbors, and that if there were times when she needed to go to a class at night, we would have people who could watch the children and people who we could trust and who the children knew. So those are some of the things that made it us able to do it, and made me okay with doing it. So I guess one thing you can probably see from this is that that strong support network that we had was something that diffused certain conflicts that we might have had that might have been more intense over money and time management and so on. So we've been really fortunate to be able to both pursue careers and still be able to have quality time for the children, and it's been great. So that part I would say, maybe it's linear in some sense, but not involving like avoided conflict or anything.
No, I mean it sounds to me as though you two were very deliberate and with some understandable hesitation, really communicating about something that was not within your family's traditions. So I guess with that that moment in your history, I wonder how you imagine conversation with Karen might start to develop or might unfold now in this new time of bringing your realizations down to the ground, as you were talking about before. I think a couple of weeks ago you said to me that you couldn't yet imagine how she would respond if you told her what you've been thinking. Is that changing at all? Are you starting to see?
Yeah, well, actually, just something that I realized just in just prompted by your questions was that like we were able to communicate about something that was sort of outside of the norm for our family and cultural background. And that's what this is as well.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of precedent for that.
What are some ways?
But
oh, go ahead.
But I'm realizing that I think maybe the thing that I'm most worried about or anxious about is maybe it's not her reaction so much, I can't imagine, as what else I would do.
Uh-huh.
Because
in your career,
because it's more like I've invested all this time in something and it's been successful, and that fills that need that I had for being the breadwinner, being the successful, the patriarch kind of thing. That is kind of a value in my family structure.
And maintaining ties to this community where you were raised.
Yeah.
That's provided both spiritual and it sounds like a lot of social and material support.
Yeah. Yeah. So it just seems almost impossible to imagine an alternative. So it's maybe it's the fear of the loss of that makes me hesitant to bring this up with her. And plus, like I was just saying to you a moment ago about how good we have it.
Yeah.
So that I don't want to disturb that. So it's not that I don't think she would be understanding and supportive. It's more just like, because it's so impossible to imagine like what the next step would be after that kind of a conversation. Because as soon as I start communicating this to people, it becomes more and more real.
Yeah.
Like I said with you, one of the things that was nice from our earlier sessions was just nice but disturbing.
Yeah.
Was saying this starts to move me closer, sort of coming down to the ground.
It brings it out into the world.
So especially if I tell my wife, then it's even more moving in that direction. But that direction is so scary because what could possibly be there?
Yeah. So to enter into conversation about this with Karen or with other friends or family feels like it might require already having defined what this next step is. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, or having some, maybe not, if not defined, at least some
inkling,
tentative inkling. Yeah, inkling. And that's hard to imagine.
Does it ever feel as though these conversations with Karen or with anybody else could be a tool through which to start to discover what these potentials might be for new directions or new career?
Yeah, I guess so.
Not fully.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess. I mean, with Karen, there would be, I think, I think it would be difficult for her because she's and her family and so on, and how we're raising the children now. She's fully invested in that worldview and in her faith. So I think it would be difficult for her. Not that she wouldn't be understanding. So I don't perceive anything immediately coming out of those conversations that would be like pointers toward the next step.
I ask because it sounds though Karen herself made this kind of both personal but also pragmatic choice in going into the law and stepping outside of this traditional role that had been not handed to her but expected of her.
Mm-hmm.
So there had been, it looks like, some creative thinking and willingness to go beyond what was already defined, but it doesn't feel like those those qualities of her thought would really extend to moving outside the ministry. That's a little bit too far outside of the scope.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. I think that it's a difference kind of between a change within the structure and then stepping outside
of it entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the element that's the most, jarring.
Yeah.
But maybe, like you were thinking, maybe it's talking to somebody about what the options might be for an ex-pastor.
Do you know anyone who has left pastoral work?
I don't off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it wouldn't be that difficult to find someone. I mean, I could even do it in a kind of sneaky way. I could reach out to my network and say, I'm doing an article, or I want to do a sermon on, those who leave, those who fall out of faith.
Mm-hmm.
So, and actually, come to think of it, that might be a kind of therapeutic / educational way to direct my ministry in the near term.
Yeah.
Because I do think that people of faith have something important to learn
Mm-hmm.
from people who leave it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a tendency sometimes in Protestant and evangelical Christian culture toward regarding a faith as kind of certainty.
Mm-hmm.
And being so fervent in one's beliefs,
Yeah.
and doubt is regarded as just the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
And this is something I think that sometimes the Catholics get better. They recognize that the importance of doubt
As an element of faith.
Yeah, that a faith that doesn't encourage that and wrestle with that is not a really strong and confident faith.
Yeah.
It's an insecure one that is afraid of the outside world. And so that's something that I think that actually, this seems like a good idea. In the near term, I could find a way to weave into my ministry elements of what I'm going through,
Mm-hmm.
but in a way that can be beneficial for
And accessible to the
and accessible
congregation.
to the congregation. Not to start to try and burst their bubble or take them out of their faith, but in order to expose them to something that is beneficial, but also for me, it can make it less hollow.
Yeah.
So that maybe that's like a good short-term strategy as I start this process of figuring out if or how to
Move forward to another.
unwind to
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you would be naming doubt as a legitimate experience that all people have, that if we don't acknowledge, we're sort of denying ourselves our full experience of our own inner life and
Mm-hmm.
life with each other, potentially in community.
Mm-hmm. And which is actually could be considered a kind of sin.
Yeah.
Of trying to keep reality at arm's length.
Yeah.
Denying oneself. Not being fully honest. So rejecting the truth. So I think there's a lot to work with there in terms of having the courage to open oneself, be vulnerable to different ideas, to something that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like there are a lot of resources coming of this trip, this change that you're experiencing. So it does feel like starting to reach out to faith traditions that have looked at doubt more directly, and maybe also to some pastors who have left the calling.
Yeah.
Could be useful right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would, and actually, yeah. Just, I feel like this has been the most kind of like a breakthrough session we've had so far. Because for the first time, just in reflecting on questions you asked, it sounds, it's like I can start to, I don't know if I do yet, but I can start to see this as an opportunity, as a, not a disastrous thing. Um, what's been happening to me, but as a, the start of something new. So not still scary, but not not quite as scary
Yeah, and constructive.
as it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and constructive in many ways.
So yeah, thank you.
All right. So are we going to see each other this time next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that. I'll think about some of these things and maybe try and contact some people, and then go from there. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.